Welcome Wargamers, Doug here from 2 Plus Stuff, and today we're going to be taking a look at the newest General's Handbook 22 to 23 Season 1. Where are we going to get more seasons? I don't know. They don't tell me these things, but I want to know now. Massive changes to the game inside this book. Like, I cannot understate. They went and shifted the focus from monsters, which is the last GHB, to infantry, which they said they were going to do, but the way that they made those changes is monumental. So in this video, we're going to explore that. I'm going to touch on a few ideas regarding the missions, because there are some that I do have some feedback on. Others are very straightforward and things that you would kind of expect to see in a GHB, so we'll go through those as they come up. But for now, let's go to the downward cam, check out what you get when you buy the newest GHB. So here we are looking downward. This is the newest General's Handbook. There's the cover. If you would like to get one yourself, please consider using the affiliate link for Noble Knight Games in the description down below. Every sale goes to help support the channel. That means a lot to me. This copy was sent to me by Games Workshop, and I want to thank them very much for it. And when you get the book, there's a few things that come with it. Obviously, General's Handbook itself. We'll get to the contents of that in a second, but along with that, you get 8 objective marker. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Yeah, I could totally count. This is why I'm a YouTuber, not an accountant. A bunch of objective markers, as well as the battle tactics for this season. Not the grand strategies, just the tactics, but they are different enough that you are going to want these as reference material, so I like that a lot. The next thing, little booklet you might expect to see, has all the points listed. I'm not going to go too much into the points because, to me, this is good fodder for like a faction by faction discussion, not like a sweeping overview. So we'll talk about those in a separate video. So focusing on the main event here, one thing I don't remember seeing in the last GHB that I do want to point out is when you buy it, you get this little card, and underneath here is a code. So you can actually access the General's Handbook in the app now, which I don't remember that being the case for the last one. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. Offer is only available in English at this time. Set that to the side. It is nice anytime you can get digital assets as well as your physical ones. I am here for it because it increases the value for all kinds of players. So win. Let's take a look. So it is set up much like the last GHB, where they're kind of framing this season, if you will, in a particular location. Last time it was Thondia, even though the missions and stuff didn't have much to do with it. The overall theme and vibe they were going for was Thondia. Big old great plains, lots of monsters roaming said plains. This time we're fighting in a continent known as Gallet, or Gallet. I don't know how to pronounce it. There's not a whole lot of information out there with the team actually pronouncing the word. But this is an interesting location because instead of being giant plains where monsters roam, instead the entire landmass of Gallet is actually underground. So like, obviously there is a surface, but it's so dangerous there with storms and stuff that most life has gone subterranean, and there's like a whole hollowed out honeycomb of corridors and stuff like that underground. Basically, the short and sweet of it is there's going to be missions that are trying to convey a general theme of close quarters, cramped, underground stuff. We're going to talk about those missions in a bit. Then we're going to talk about basically any changes to the rules pack and things like grand strategies, battle tactics, rules, that kind of stuff. So let's start jumping in here. This season begins like any other with a battle pack. Really quickly, they made no changes whatsoever to the minimums and maximums that I could tell. It's basically build your army the same way you've been doing it. And so the interesting conversation actually picks up when we talk about the realm rules. Again, region of war, Gallet, the splintered land. The first rule here is masters of the splintered land. Friendly battle line units that have a wounds characteristic of 4 or less and do not have a mount, so we're talking about infantry, 4 wounds less, gain the Galatian veterans keyword. Straight up. It doesn't matter if they're part of a battalion. None of that stuff matters. Every single unit that you take, intentionally or unintentionally, that is 4 or less wounds and no mount, is a veteran. The next rule is proving grounds. This is going to replace the rule where at round 3, whoever goes second can remove an objective. This is kind of meant to replace that, okay? So we're not doing that anymore. Instead, we have this. At the start of each battle round, after players have determined who will take the first turn, the player who will take the second turn can pick one objective on the battlefield to be the proving ground. Until the end of that battle round, the same objective cannot be picked as the proving ground more than once per battle, and only one objective can be marked as the proving ground at any one time. Only models in units with the Galatian Veterans keyword, like we just mentioned, can contest an objective marked as the proving ground. We pause there. There are going to be missions that bring the proving ground into play a little bit, but it's interesting because this is going to be what separates, I think, excellent players from newer ones and ones that haven't taken the time to really learn the rule, because if you know that your opponent does not have a veteran unit near something, I can actually pick an objective in my opponent's territory, which you wouldn't normally do, to be like the special thing, and they can't contest it. And that's amazing. That's probably the biggest wild card to me. It's whatever. I think it's going to be forgotten a lot, if I'm perfectly honest with you. The next one is the Bonds of Battle. Not because it's not a good rule. I want to point that out. It's an insanely good rule if you remember it. The Bonds of Battle. When a model in a Galatian Veterans unit makes an attack with a melee weapon, you can target an enemy unit within half an inch of another model from that Galatian Veterans unit instead of using the weapon's range characteristic for that attack. If you do so, the attacking model must be within half an inch. So this is 40k combat. If you're not familiar with it, if I have, let's get some, we'll use these bottles here as models, not like I have 10,000 models surrounding me at any given time. This is one guy in the unit, this is another. Let's say the enemy is this crystal thing. Normally, if I have a 1-inch ranged weapon, this guy would not be able to attack this one. But because he's within half an inch of a model from the same unit that's within half an inch, he gets to attack. Realistically, this is a colossal buff to any units that have 1-inch ranged weapons, common infantry, and then specifically that have like 32 or bigger millimeter bases. So for example, my favorite example from this, More Boys for my Bone Splitters. I have 30 More Boys sitting on the shelf. They've never been that great because I can't get a good number of attacks in. The bases are 32 mil. I just literally cannot get enough models in combat to make them do anything really and also keep coherency. This is basically allowing me to do that. I'm getting more models. That entire second rank of 1-inch ranged weapons can now do something meaningful. Now that right there increases the destructive power of so many units in this game. This is when I said it's like massive changes. Yes, because for me, that would take a unit of 10 More Boys who would usually get 5 or 6 in, all the way up reasonably to 9 or 10. I mean, depending obviously on how they're kind of spaced around and the formation of the opponent they're trying to envelop. There's a lot of other factors, but I'm reasonably getting a lot more attacks in, and they clock in at like 5 attacks each. I think it's 4, but you know what I mean? Like there's a lot more dice being thrown. They explode on 6s. Apply that same logic to any other unit, because just about any other unit would be better than More Boys. You can see why it's really nasty. So that is, to me, the biggest one. Next one here, Realmsphere Magic, the Gaze of Ghur. It irks me so much they couldn't space it so that the spell was underneath its own description, but hey, that's just me. I understand there's probably some book editor at GW who was also gritting their teeth until an executive told them, just print the dang thing, we're tired of waiting. So, Gaze of Ghur is a spell that has a casting value of 7 and a range of 12 inches. If successfully cast, pick one enemy unit within range and visible to the caster. When determining the number of models in that enemy unit that are contesting an objective, your opponent must have that number rounding down. Y'all, that's fantastic. We're going to get into how many models it counts on an objective is not necessarily the same as how many models are there. We know that a little bit, like monsters count as 5. Usually hero units count as 2 because they have enough wounds, that kind of stuff. But this really solidifies that you can now manipulate this as a concept. So that same 10-man unit of More Boys, they're now going to count as 5 when they're sitting on an objective. So you can actually use this to steal objectives out from underneath an opponent, provided that the situation is right. It's going to be dependent, but it's a great tool to have in the toolbox. The next one is the Realm Command, and I'm going to give you a spoiler. I don't really get this one, so if you're seeing a use for it, please let me know in the comments down below, okay? Overwhelming Assault. You can use this command ability at the end of your charge phase. A unit that receives the command must be a Galatian Veterans unit. I'm just going to say Veterans in the future, thank you. That has 10 or more models. Pick one enemy unit within 1 inch of that unit that has a wound characteristic of 4 or less and roll a dice. If the roll is greater than the number of models in that enemy unit, the Strike Last effect applies to that enemy unit in the following combat phase. Okay, so I have to have 10 or more models in my unit. So we're going with my more boys again, because that's the easiest. It's the one I got. They have to charge somebody, right? It's at the end of the charge phase. Yes. They charge somebody, and then I roll a die, and that die has to be higher than the number of models in whatever they're fighting. I don't like that, because I'm throwing 10 guys against, what do you normally roll on a die? Like a 3 or a 4, like when you do the averages and that kind of stuff. Who are you rolling high against? I mean, I guess there's like Stormcast units, like Annihilators and Praetors, but I mean, it seems like so niche that it's like, what? I mean, it's great for if you're attacking a hero, I guess, right? You can always, of course, roll what if the roll is greater. So on a 2-up, you can make a hero fight last, which is good. I mean, if it's like Nagash or something, sure. It seems exceptionally narrow, and I don't like spending command points to then have to roll a die. You know what I mean? Like, I don't mind it when it's a monstrous rampage, because when a stomp doesn't work, I don't really care. I didn't do a whole lot for it. But this is a bit different. So if you know of a use or a situation where that would have come in clutch, please let me know. I'm always trying to learn. Now we're looking at core battalions here. This is when we start putting these core rules for our region into practice, right? You're taking them from conceptual to army building with core battalions. The first one is called Expert Conquerors. Galatian veterans units only. So the minimum is 2 troops, but you can have up to 3. And remember, veterans, 4 or less wounds, no mounts. Each model in this battalion counts as 3 models for the purposes of contesting objectives. So my 2 basic more boy units in this battalion are 30 dudes on an objective. Now keep in mind that 30 can be divided by half, rounding down, so 15, and then someone can come and take the objective from me. That's how we're playing things. We're really cranking the mechanic of how many counts, I guess, are on this objective, right? How many points worth of dudes are capping this objective? I wish that there was a word for that. Like, you know, a unit might be 10 dudes, but I wish there was a word for how many points, weight, whatever counts on an objective. If you know a good term for it, leave it in the comments. I'll start using it. The next battalion is Bounty Hunters. Actually, I'm going to pause here. So that one's huge. Let's just pause there. Galatian Veterans Unit, by the orders of what it means to be one, I mean, you put 60 grots on an objective, it's 180 counts as, you know, things you have to lift up, even if you divide that in 2. Now, of course, we're going to look at the missions and see that that doesn't really always matter. Hordes are going to be massive, I think, with this GHB, but man, that being able to count as 3 is it's just so good. I almost wish the veterans rule had a cap of like at a max of 20 models or 15, or I don't care what the number is, pick whatever you want. But I wish that there was a cap there, because it just makes it so that some units will literally never give up an objective. Like, you could do a 200 Plague Monk spam and just own the board, because not only are they like super killy, which they can be for sure if they're buffed up right, but also they count as dang near infinite number of people on an objective. So we'll throw that out there. I'm going to punt that conversation to final thoughts, but that is a huge one. You are going to want at least one of these things to ensure that you have some pieces in your list that can go cap an objective assuredly. The next one is called Bounty Hunters. The rule here is Headhunters. If the target of an attack made with a melee weapon by a model in this battalion is a Galatian veteran, add 1 to the damage characteristic of that weapon for that attack. Again, it's 2 troops with an optional 3rd, but keep in mind the difference in wording here. With the first one, you have to bring veterans that count as more on objectives. With the second one, Bounty Hunters, you can bring anything. My boar boys, who are not veterans, can be a part of this, and when they hit a veterans unit, because it's the target of an attack, they add 1 to the damage characteristic. That's pretty good. It still has some flaws. I don't think that is nearly as good as counting as 3 on an objective, but it does access a little bit of more damage for those armies that, like, if you just need to just slice through hordes, getting +1 to your wound characteristic is never anything to like be sad about, but I'm not sure it tips the scale back over. So pausing to look at these, I like the idea of veterans. It is a great way to focus on infantry stuff. The idea of having the proving grounds where wherever the focus of veterans are and like kind of like the eye of the gamer or whatever, sending veterans to go capture a command point and they're the only ones who can contest it. I like that. That's a super fun idea. We're going to talk about some problems that it creates later on with missions, but overall I do like the idea. The spell is fantastic because if you are playing a matched play game, you need to get okay with understanding objective play. That's how you win games, right? And narrative stuff, we can do whatever we want, but if you are playing a match play game, butts in seats is what matters, right? You need to be sitting on that objective, and the Gaze of Ghur really does throw that in a wrench because all it takes is one wizard to completely invert the math of how you're capping an objective. That's cool. The realm command, I don't get it. I mean, I understand conceptually what it does and how it could be used. It just doesn't interest me at all, unless somebody says something cool in the comments. And the core battalions, I would be cooler if this said counts as 2 models, or there was a cap on the size of the units that could fit in here, like how it can only be reinforced once, or something like that. Bounty hunters is one that I do actually like quite a bit. I'm just not sure it offsets the expert conquerors. Regardless, like, what they are incentivizing is units instead of monsters, which they said they were going to do. Lots of bodies on the table and lots of mayhem happening. Like, I like the idea of lots of bodies coming and then huge swaths of units being deleted off the board. Here we go, just adjusted the lights for us. Now we're going to move into grand strategies here. Let's go from the top. One thing I want to say about the other ones from the last GHB, they were really nice for introducing us to the concept of grand strategies and battle tactics and stuff. I felt, were a bit vanilla, of like, take something from your opponent. Okay, well, I can do that. These, I'm just going to preface, are a bit more complicated. Okay, they're going to be harder to get. Same thing goes for some of the battle tactics. And I'm okay with that increase in difficulty of achieving a strategy, or I mean, they should be grand. It's literally in the name. I don't know what to tell you. So grand strategies. No place for the weak. When the battle round ends, you complete this grand strategy if there are no battle line units from your opponent's starting army on the battlefield. Okay, so kill all their battle line units. Could be easy, could be hard, depending on the opponent, of course. But, you know, the fact that it's not tied to Galatian veterans is pretty good. Tame the land. When the battle ends, you complete this grand strategy if you control all the objectives on the battlefield that are wholly outside your territory. Of course, you can have the ones inside your territory, but this is just incentivizing you to reach out, steal everything from the table that didn't start in your deployment. Cool. Defend what's ours. When the battle ends, you complete this grand strategy if there are no enemy units wholly within your territory. Now, I like that thematically, of just like, you know, it's important to my leader to keep the enemy from even approaching their territory, like maybe the cities of Sigmar are trying to push back the orcs in Ghur. I totally get that thematically. The thing is that because you broadcast these to your opponent before the game really starts, all they have to do is move one person across the line and you lose it. So that's not one that I've ever really been interested in. Next is take what's theirs, which is the polar opposite. When the battle ends, you complete this grand strategy if there are more friendly units than enemy units wholly within your opponent's territory. So just rush the heck forward. You can, I like it because they're kind of like polar opposites of Tame the Land, right? Tame the Land is you have the objectives, and the other one is just like, you made a good try. You rushed forward to even try to get the objectives. I like that a lot. Next is Demonstration of Strength. When the battle ends, you complete this grand strategy if there are 3 or more Galatian veteran units from your starting army on the battlefield. That's going to vary depending on the size of the units, how survivable they are. That one's kind of a wild card, but it is one that can be done reasonably. Keep in mind that even tiny units can be veterans because, you know, you have things like warp flamethrowers or Jezzails. They can be, absolutely. Last one here is Show of Dominance. When the battle ends, you complete this grand strategy if there are any friendly veteran units in each quarter of the battlefield. Again, that one's going to depend on what you are able to do list-wise. I don't really understand why these two both exist. Like Demonstration of Strength, have 3 veterans on the table. Show of Dominance, you have to have a veterans in each quarter, which means 4 units have to exist. So it seems like Demonstration of Strength would be easier. However, there's a caveat. The Demonstration of Strength, where you have to have 3 units exist, says they have to be from your starting army, okay? Show of Dominance does not. So if you summon in, say, Plague Bearers, well, they meet all the qualifications for becoming a veteran unit. So they come on the board with that keyword. You can summon them in, and now you can, you have to have 4 of them, and they have to be in the table quarters, but it does remove that restriction of being in the starting army. So that's going to matter for some, not for others. Taking a look at grand strategies from kind of a back view, looking at the grand strategies, kind of stepping back, I like that some of them focus on the veteran aspect of things, but not all of them, right? 2 of the, 6? As far as the one that I'm going to try to go for the most with my Bone Splitters, I'm probably going to go with Tame the Land, control all of the objectives outside of my territory, because it lends to what I want to do anyway, which is just run forward like a maniac. Heading over to battle tactics, let's talk about these bad boys. First one here, and also I want to point out they function exactly the same. You start a hero phase, you pick one battle tactic, you have to reveal it to your opponent, and so on. The first one is gaining momentum. Pick one enemy unit on the battlefield. You complete this battle tactic if that unit is destroyed during this turn, and you control more objectives than your opponent at the end of this turn. This essentially combines a couple of the other battle tactics together. You have to destroy a unit, and you have to have more objectives than your opponent. Now, the unit doesn't have to be anywhere near the objectives. There's nothing like that. So as long as you kill something and you know that you can control more, that's an easy peasy one. This is a great first turn for me. Bone Splitters, my boars can rush up. I'll pick whatever the weakest thing is. With my pregame move, I can almost always capture more objectives than my opponent that round 1, and the pigs can delete something if they really, really want. Next is Eye for an Eye. You complete this battle tactic if 1 or more friendly units were destroyed in the previous turn, and 1 or more enemy units are destroyed during this turn. Now, I have mixed feelings about this one. I like it in the sense of thematically, right? You kill one of my things, I kill one of yours. I think it's awesome. It's very Ghur-like, eye for an eye. It's a perfect expression of that phrase. What I would suggest is that when you are going to use this tactic, before you declare it and lock yourself in, confirm with your opponent about what happened last round. Like, it's interesting because it requires you to have a discussion and know what happened in the previous battle round, which I've never seen a battle tactic do. I think to make sure everything's on the level, you say, hey, listen, remember last round when you killed my Wurgog Prophet? Yes. Okay, well, then I'm going to do Eye for an Eye. You killed him, and now I'm going to kill another unit of yours. Because what you don't want is, these games go on for so long, if it's round 3 on day 1 of a 5-round event, everyone's freaking tired. Just going out of your way to confirm what happened in the previous round with your opponent to make sure they're on board when it comes to scoring is going to save you a ton of headaches. Because the worst thing that could happen is you declare this, you kill the enemy unit, and your opponent goes, yeah, but I didn't kill anything of yours last round. That was 2 rounds ago. I'm not saying that opponents will try to purposefully deceive you or anything like that. I'm always assuming positivity. But when everyone gets tired and possibly a bit tipsy, it might be really good to just be like, hey, last round you killed this thing, right? Cool, awesome. I'm going to pick Eye for an Eye. That's just a little bit of advice from Uncle Doug. So, next one is Desecrate Their Lands. Pick one terrain feature or faction terrain feature that is partially or wholly within your opponent's territory, so basically anything but yours. You complete this battle tactic if you control that terrain feature at the end of this turn. Okay, pick a landmark, get it. No problem with that whatsoever. This one's mine. Sorry, I'm going to pause. Desecrate Lands, it is just like pick an objective and go steal it, but I like the fact that it's tied to a terrain feature because it requires you to have a unit that's not necessarily intended to score. Of course, the objective could be on the terrain feature or whatever, but it could pull you in different directions away from the main focus of objective play. And I like that. I like whenever it mixes things up. Plus, terrain features tend to have a larger footprint, so it's harder to achieve just by virtue of having to control a bigger thing. The next one is This One's Mine. Pick one enemy unit on the battlefield. You complete this battle tactic if that unit is destroyed during this turn by an attack made by a model picked to be your general. This is going to be a hard one to set up because we've all had those moments where, we want one unit to bring the enemy down to like 1 or 2 wounds, and then your hero can come and deliver the final blow for style points, and then the first unit accidentally kills them. You could easily deny yourself. It's going to be situational because, if it's like my boss in combat with like 2 chain ghasts, sure, yeah, I'm pretty confident he can do that. But if it's like pretty much any other situation besides that, I do not trust any Bone Splitter's hero to destroy something in combat. So it's really going to depend on who your general is, how they're kitted out, where they are on the field, if they are engaging the enemy, because a lot of generals are going to be like wizards and stuff, and they don't want to get into combat. So there's a lot of different things that are going to appeal to different armies there. Conversely, if you're a Sons of Behemoth, you're like, oh, this guy's going to just trash some units. I'm fine. The next one is head-to-head. Pick one enemy veterans unit, remember, Galatian veterans, unit on the battlefield. You complete this battle tactic if that unit is destroyed this turn by an attack made by a friendly veterans unit or an ability of a friendly veterans unit. So that's fantastic. There's going to be quite a few options there. I suspect players will be generally incentivized to bring veterans of their own based on some of these other battle tactics. So I think that they will always be on the field. I like the fact that the veterans keyword is not optional. So you have to, if you have a unit that meets the qualifications, they gain the keyword. So they are a liability or an asset. Nothing in between. But this is another one that I would absolutely do. I could definitely have more boys go in and just ice something really, really simple and small. Next one here, outmuscle. Pick one enemy veterans unit that has any models contesting an objective marked as the proving ground. Pause. So now we're bringing the proving ground rules where veterans are the only ones able to contest this particular objective. We're bringing that into the battle tactics. So your enemy has to have a veterans unit on the objective that either one of you, depending on who went first or second that round, deemed as the proving ground. You complete this battle tactic if no models from that enemy unit are contesting the proving ground at the end of this turn. Important distinction. It doesn't mean you destroy the unit. It just means that they're not contesting it. So if you delete enough models to where the unit is pulled off of contesting it, even though the unit's not dead, it still counts for the purposes of this. Also, you can do stuff like Beasts of Chaos have the spell on the shaman that like forces enemy units to move. That is a thing that can be very powerful because you can essentially pull people from objectives, which will, you know, if you do a 1-2 punch of pulling them in one direction and then hitting them really hard in another, you can definitely pull some stuff off an objective. So I only take a moment to point out they're not asking you to kill anything or destroy a unit. It is simply that they no longer contest it. Next one here, against the odds. Pick one unit from your starting army on the battlefield. You complete this battle tactic if, at the end of this turn, any models from that unit are contesting an objective you control, and that objective is not being contested by any veteran models. That's a really simple one because the wording of it is so straightforward. If you start the game with an objective in your backline and you have a veterans unit on it, you do it because there's no enemies contesting it. That's all you got to do. And the last one here, barge through enemy lines, which is a name that just appeals to me. You complete this battle tactic if there are 2 or more units from your starting army wholly within your opponent's territory at the end of this turn. If 2 or more of those units are veterans, score 1 additional victory point. This is going to be one I can essentially auto-earn round 1. My pregame move ensures that I will have some orcs outside, in my opponent's zone. So I like that a lot. I understand that other armies with more limited mobility will struggle with it, but I like it. And I like that there is one that offers an additional victory point for playing the game with veterans. So those are the battle tactics. Kind of doing a review thought from a high level like I did before, I have to say is a good swath of just go get an objective, stop your opponent from controlling an objective, whether or not you have it, and then also destroying things. In fact, one of my favorites is gaining momentum, which is just destroy a unit, have more objectives. I like those two as a combination because if nothing else, it makes the game move. Like at Vault Wars, there was a Legion of the First Prince or whatever, I don't know, the Be'lakor sub-faction of Slaves to Darkness, and he had a game where he won on objectives but didn't actually kill a model, and that it won't work here. And I like that. Thank you for addressing that as a possibility in this game. It was against Sylvaneth BT Dubs, in case you're curious. So I like it. I feel like each of these at least forces you to move, which is what battle tactics in general should do. There's one where it's like, if you already started within your zone, sure, I don't have a problem with that. But I like the fact that most of them incentivize you to reach out and do something on the table. Because That to me is the whole point of playing missions and stuff like that. In the back here is a handy little scoring sheet. I don't recall if the other GHB had one, but I do like that it exists. And the only scoring sheet that I've really seen is the one that comes from Vault Wars. They did their own one, and I liked it. This seems a bit condensed and kind of, I think, written a bit differently. I like it a lot, and I would absolutely copy this. You know, you could fit, what, 2 of these on an 8.5 by 11. You can bulk print them, get them for your event, and this way you can help players keep track of all the things that happen in their game. Really nice. And so that's it for the core rules when it comes to what this season's going to be like. We'll get into the battle plans in just a second. High thoughts, putting it all together. Obviously, they are incentivizing infantry. Whether they are over-incentivizing it is a thing that we can discuss. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. When a bunch of these things were previewed through the Warhammer community articles, there was a lot of backlash because some armies, mainly Beastclaw Raiders, Sons of Behemoth, anything that has a lot of elite, big models, they are going to struggle, okay? It doesn't matter if they're in the Galatian, the battalion rather, that gives them +1 to damage. When a unit of Grots can count as, 120 dudes on an objective, it doesn't matter. My counter to that is to simply say, some days you're the bird, some days you're the statue. I don't know what to tell you. Like, everything ebbs and flows. 2 weeks ago, my Moor boys were the saddest unit collecting dust in my closet. Now I am over the moon excited to put them on the table. I know, for me, that means this is a success. And I also know that for other armies, it makes non-fun gaming experiences. Like I mentioned before, with all the Skaven and the Grots that can go hop on objectives. And so I'm curious to see how it'll pan out. I do think some limit should have been put on the veterans keyword, but then I also know that would have meant that we have to keep track of which units are veterans and which are not, which is a pain. Like if you have 2 Grot units, one that's reinforced to not be a veteran unit anymore and one that is, as casualties are happening, it can become blurry which one is which, and that's really annoying. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Part of me, as someone who got into the game with fantasy battles and seeing these huge tables of massive armies and just like rolling and punching each other, it gets me excited. Like that's the visual of that, of large armies clashing. Things are brutal because all of the missions are just pushing you towards one another. Everything's out of your own deployment zone, out of your areas. Go capture stuff from your opponent. Go kill your opponent. I like the idea of the game becoming more brutal. And if they are going to focus on infantry, but like they said they were going to, whatever that looked like, right? It could have been a million different rules. If you're going to incentivize infantry, to me, the game has to become more deadly so that it doesn't grind to a halt. Moving that many models is going to slow things down. It just is. However, when you look at games like, say, Horus Heresy, which plays at 3,000 points instead of 2,000 points, the guns and the weapons in that game are so much more deadly and devastating than Warhammer AOS. So even though it's more points in the game, it tends to be about the same amount of time because you're just mulching through things so much faster. I wanted that for this, and I do feel like to an extent we got that. Large groups of infantry that are designed to kill, pushed forward, and they need to mulch through one another very, very aggressively. Now, is that going to pan out on a tabletop? I have no idea. I'm sure a million channels are giving their opinions about it right now, but I can definitely see what they were going for. Like I said, I do think there should have been a reinforcement cap on the veterans, but that opens up other doors that are kind of murky and kind of a pain. So I get it. More than anything, I just want to try it out and see what it's like. Because, I mean, there's, I don't do competitive commentary, so the factions that I'm thinking of that really benefit from this, you got stuff like Skaven, Gloomspite Gits. Sylvaneth can do really well because Dryads can now be a threat on an objective play level. You can do quite a bit of things, like I said, with Bone Splitters, Cruel Boys even. They can now swing above our weight class a bit. Fire Slayers are a big winner to me. Even things like, I don't know, Scourge Privateers, that kind of stuff. Anytime you can get more models in, it's great. So in general, I'm like super here for it. I think it is definitely an idea worth trying, and I would much rather have the game mix it up every once in a while than just be kind of doing the same thing. Now that being said, let's talk about the actual missions, because those rules in a vacuum don't matter when you drop them into missions that give them context. Right, and so let's talk about that. Remember, as we are talking about these missions, we're going to go back to the downward cam. Every single turn of a 5-round game, whoever goes second is picking one of them to be the proving grounds, and you cannot pick the same one more than once, no matter who is the one picking. So you have to look out for gotchas on your opponent, because now you're trying to see, okay, where don't they have veterans, because those are the only ones that can test, and it could be in their deployment zone, so they think they're getting a guaranteed point, and now all of a sudden they're not. And I'm going to run through these very briefly because I really just want to pick up the ones that are actually very interesting. A lot of these are kind of rehashes of ones that we've done before. This one is the Prize of Gallet. Special rule here is Amberstone deposits. In this battle, victory points are scored for objectives you control can only be scored if the objective has been activated. I read that really strange. Apologies. You have to activate an objective before you can earn it for points. At the start of each battle round, after players have determined who will take the first turn, the player who will take the second turn must pick one objective on the battlefield to be activated. Activated objectives remain activated for the rest of the battle. In addition, the objectives on the border of a player's territory cannot be activated until the second battle round. So let's take a look at this in context here. Right here is our board. We have our long ways deployment. We have a kind of a cross going here for the objectives. 5 on the table. You roll off dice. Whoever goes second picks one to be activated. Round 1, only these 3 can be. Round 2, that's when you can start to pick the one that's on your objective, or any player's objective now that I think about it. And so the victory points are slow rolled out. And I like that because it means no army can be so oppressively aggressive, right? Your 3 units of 60 grots can't all rush forward and then just never die. Instead, one of them is going to be worth something. The next battle round, 2 of them are going to be worth something. And it kind of slow rolls the build that way. I think it's definitely an interesting mission. Like, it's actually one that I really... sorry, my book's getting crazy. It's one that I'm really excited to try because I'm curious to see what that kind of bottleneck on VP scoring does. Because you have to remember, the way you score victory points, control at least one objective, control 2 or more objectives, which means that is not even a possibility round 1. I like it. More objectives than your opponent. Okay, and then that's going to look different round to round. And then score 2 victory points if you completed your battle tactics. So there's some cool stuff there. Next one, this is one I wanted to point out that I like quite a bit. The Realmstone cache. Essentially, there is one, here we go. Here's the deployment. You can see it's kind of cut off on the sides, so you're going to be compact here in the center. There's one objective in the dead center of the board, and I believe it's round 3? At the start of the 3rd battle round, yeah. Someone's going to roll a die, and this thing explodes and shoots off in 2 different directions. So let's say, for example, we rolled either a 3 or a 4. It's going to explode, and one is going to go here, the other is going to go there. You can see the little arrows that are telling you 3 or 4, it goes this direction, 3 or 4, it goes that direction. So the one in the center, my understanding, is destroyed, and then it splits into 2 going to these exact points. Now, it does point out in the actual rules of the mission that if for whatever reason this center objective is moved, it doesn't matter. When it explodes, it goes to these exact points. So if a Gargant comes up and kicks it to the left, it doesn't like shift this design over to the left or anything like that. I like it because anytime the location of objectives changes drastically in a mission, I always have a great time because it makes the game so much more reactionary. And I thought that was quite a bit of fun. So round 3, the thing explodes. Battle lines drawn. This is one where we are essentially trying to, I believe this is one we're trying to get table quarters, right? In this battle, players fight for control of the 4 quarter battlefields instead of objectives. Each quarter is controlled in the same manner as an objective, except that models must be wholly within a quarter to be able to contest it. In addition, each quarter counts as an objective for player purposes of grand strategies, battle tactics, and abilities. This falls apart really, really quickly when Gargants can kick an objective. Just throwing that out there. But I like the concept. Confined caverns. This is where we start getting into the lore aspects of Gallet being underground. In this battle, units cannot be removed from the battlefield with an effect that would allow them to be set up later again in the battle. Translocation. Beasts of Chaos have like the shadow, not shadow gauge, but whatever, the one where they can fall into the shadows and reappear on the board. There's a few units that do that. I think some Skaven ones can, and what are some other ones? I don't know, anything that has like shadowy kind of stuff. Shadow Stalkers, I think, can do that as well. So pretty simple. And then it's the normal scoring rubric. It's just one of these counts as an objective. What is strange to me though is that the when you start layering on top the proving ground rules to this, it gets a little bit weird because one of these quarters is a proving ground that only veteran units can contest, which is a cool idea, right? Because if you have all your veterans in one and your opponent has 30 models, but none of them are veterans, it doesn't matter. I like that aspect of it. But when it comes into the battle tactics of like stop an opponent veteran unit from contesting an objective, that's a big footprint to have to push people out of. So it's going to have its own challenges, is what I'm trying to say. The lurkers below. This one's super fun. In this battle, you must control the objective on the border of your territory before you can contest the objective at the center. In addition, you have to have the center before you can contest things in your opponents. Objectives cannot be controlled in the first battle round. Again, they are bottlenecking how many points you can earn. So if we look at our board description here, we have the short sides for our deployment zones, and then we have 3 objectives going along the center. Round 1, no one is capping anything. You cannot access any of these objectives. So it's going to be a bunch of positioning for being aggressive, and that's about it. Round 2, you can control yours. You can't control the middle one without controlling yours. The next round, you can now go to your opponents. You can't control your opponent's one without controlling the center. And so what this is creating essentially is a tug of war. You're trying to push to get the objectives. You want to control more than your opponent. Whoever is in the center has a lot of power, but it's easy to overextend yourself in a game where the double turn is a thing. So I like that push and pull quite a bit. The presence of idols. This one actually doesn't have a ton of special rules. Essentially, let me summarize this. I'm just going to read it. After deployment, but before determining who will take the first turn in the battle round, each player must pick 3 different friendly units on the battlefield, starting with the attacker. The units each player picks are their idle units for the battle. Have the number of models that flee due to a failed battle shock test, rounding down, while their unit is wholly within 6 inches of any idle units in their army. Other than that, it's the exact same as a normal mission. You have your quarter deployment, 3 objectives going across, kind of catty corner to the other ones. And it's a very simple mission. Honestly, I think it's kind of a dud because, okay, so you have to keep track of these 3 units on top of the veteran stuff. There's a few others I want to just kind of breeze through. The Nidus paths allow you to teleport all across the board into your opponent's back line. That's kind of a neat one. The Mighty and the Cunning, you're fighting over these line of objectives in the dead center. You score 2 victory points each time a veteran's unit is destroyed. Score 1 additional victory point if that enemy veteran unit was contesting an objective when it was destroyed, so now we have a bit of liability. But remember, this is stacking with your proving grounds where only veteran units can capture things. So you can bait your opponent into, hey, go over there with your veteran units, and then the next round you come back with a counterattack and delete theirs. Head-on collision has you going into each other's deployment zones. There's actually almost no special rules here. The only thing here is Deadly Denizens. You can't control an objective in the first battle round, which means even the one in your deployment. That's about it. There's nothing really particularly great about that one. Won't Back Down allows you, I believe this is the one where you can burn objectives. Let's see. Oh, no, here we go. Won't Back Down. Rally points. So you can see the board here. It makes use of every single inch of this space. There's a sum total of 6 objectives on the board. In this battle, if a player uses the rally command and that unit receives the command is wholly within 6 inches of an objective they control, when they roll a dice for a slain model from that unit, they can return it on a 5-up instead of a 6. Veteran units can return a slain model on a 4-up. So that is going to be a brutal slog through infantry armies. I can already tell you that one, because rally's good. I think that was kind of the point of this mission, is like, hey guys, rally exists as a rule, you should use it. The Silk Steel Nests. This is one where you can basically burn objectives for your opponent. We've seen this before, nothing particularly fancy about it. You get 1 point for controlling your opponent's objectives and you can burn them. And close to the chest, this is one where I have to read through this because it's very odd. And this is one of my criticisms of this book. So you can see the objective, the way the deployment goes here. Defender in blue, they're gonna have 3 objectives in their side, one that's, buttered up against their attacker, and so forth on the other side. Kind of a yin-yang thing going on. So, alpha objective. The map shows which objectives belong to which player. At the start of each player's turn, the opposing player picks one of their own objectives to be the alpha objective for that turn. For example, if it's the attacker's turn, the defender picks one of the defender's objectives, as shown in the map, to be the alpha objective. And then when it comes to scoring, you get extra victory points if you have the alpha objective. Now, that's not a problem. It's not a problem to say, hey, your opponent gets to choose what the most valuable prize on the table is. That's not an issue for me. What is an issue is that now we have to keep track of what is the alpha, what is the proving ground, and everything else, like as far as like if a veteran unit is contesting it, if it's not. I don't know. That's one that's rough. Also, if you can move them, I feel like that does give you an immediate advantage. It just seems odd. And if you move them, you have to then keep track of what you're moving, right? I mean, it just kind of complicates things a smidge more. It's not my favorite mission. In fact, it's probably my least favorite from this book because of the amount of tracking. There's already so much crap to keep track of in this game. I don't want to worry about the mission. I want the mission to be very clear. And Turf War. No reserves. All units must be set up on the battlefield at the beginning of the game. This is your underground tavern, or cavern, not tavern. That's going to make Stormcast players weep. Summon units cannot shoot or charge in the turn in which they were added to your army. So there's a lot of restrictions on things coming into the battle. Honestly, I can't think of a whole lot of great shooting units. If you know of one, let me know, but that's all I got. And that's it for all of the battle plans. I'm not going to go too much into the actual endless spells. I can do a separate video if you'd like. Let me know in the comments down below if you would appreciate that. My thing with these missions, some of them I absolutely love. Others I'm like so lukewarm, it's kind of hard to articulate. This one just doesn't add a whole lot. All it does is restrict things, which is something I typically do not like in a mission. I want you to incentivize me to go do something, not just tell me what I can't do. So this is one where all you're doing is telling Stormcast players to be sad. Like there's no impetus to like push forward in particular. There's only 2 objectives on the board. It's fine. Some of the other ones, like I don't like close to the chest. The presence of idols, where you pick 3 units and they become like the icons of your army. I mean, for me personally, I only look at this from my perspective as a Bones Flares player. Even though it does nothing but benefit me with reduced battleshot casualties, I don't care. Like there's nothing exciting about these units at all. They don't become demigods of battle or anything. It just kind of is. Lurkers below, while I like the concept of a tug of war type mission, I foresee this just becoming an absolute bloodbath in the center of the board. And if you are not a killy army, say Sylvaneth, you know, they're not the sharpest sticks in the woods, so to speak, in terms of they have a lot of mobility, a lot of control power, but not raw rend and damage. This one could be a problem. Unless, you know, maybe you put a Wildwood right there between your opponent and the center one to slow them down a bit. I don't know. I just think it can over-concentrate the action of a game in a single point, and that can really bring it down a bit. But on the whole, a lot of these I really do enjoy. I very much enjoy the Prize of Gallet. I love the Realmstone cache. The idea of the objective exploding into 2 directions is really, really cool. Battle lines drawn with the quarters, not my fave, but it is what it is. And so friends, those are my thoughts on the newest GHB when it comes to the core rules that we're playing, or the battle pack for match play, I should say, and then the missions for this season. There's a good mix of missions. I think that it will reward all different kinds of armies, which is what they should do. It's just a matter of bookkeeping when it comes to now we're, you know, keeping track of what the proving ground is and what objectives have been it before and can no longer be it now is an added level of just bookkeeping that I just don't think is very rewarding. I liked the last one where it's just remove an objective round 3 because it's clean and it's simple. I also understand that they're trying to reward the infantry units, the veterans, and at the proving ground does that in spades. So I like the concept. The execution, we'll see after a few test games, but I'm keeping an open mind about it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below for this round of GHBs. Again, thank you to Games Workshop for sending me this one, and if you would like to get some at a discount, go ahead and head over to Noble Knight Games in the description below, because that helps me out. Leave your thoughts on the missions and how your army is going to be affected by this in the comments. I'd love to read and chat with you there. So thank you so much for watching and listening, and I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.